No.
Yep.
We're not on yet. We're on.
Hey everyone. Our internet's a little rough, so bear with us, please.
You're on the Wi-Fi now?
Yep.
Because it just doesn't show anything on YouTube. Okay, we're live.
Yep.
Do you want to start the agenda?
Yeah. All right, so the token sale starts tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern, and everyone will have 24 hours reserved for their registered amounts. And after that, the sale is first come, first serve. And it'll last for 10 days or until we hit the target.
Well, thank you everyone for joining the community call and your ongoing interest and support in Foam and our token sale. We're going to do a quick walkthrough of the purchaser guide that we recently published a blog post about, but I'm going to do a walkthrough now. But first, we're just going to do some baseline questions that a few people asked about the sale process, and then we have some general questions as well that we can save for the end of the sale. And please, if you're watching, feel free to add any live comments or questions during the chat, and we'll be sure to get to them by the end of the call. So in general, there are some confusion or questions around the proof of use aspect of the Foam token sale. And so as people may know, proof of use is intended to be part of our sale framework of having a consumer token meant to be for people who are going to help contribute to the network. And part of our registration process is to enforce that and guarantee it. But the final portion is proof of use, which is where you must use a certain number of the tokens as well as a certain % threshold to ever be able to unlock them. And in general, there's a 45-day initial use period where tokens can't be transferred even if you do the proof of use. But for proof of use, everyone will have to add at least 10 unique points to the map. So that's 10 unique locations or points of interest, anything you're interested in. So no matter how many tokens you buy, you must add at least 10 points. And then if you're a small purchaser, which we specify as under $10,000, or a large purchaser, which is over 10, you'll need to use at least 25% or 50% of your tokens. That doesn't mean that you need to add hundreds of points. How you reach those thresholds of percents are up to you. So that means you could stake additional tokens into those 10 points you added. You could add additional points. You can stake more tokens into them. You can vote on ongoing challenges if there are any. And you're also able to interact with the signaling contract, which is a way to influence future mining rewards for dynamic proof of location. And in that, you can deposit a large amount of your tokens in that sense and achieve the percent. So the proof of use is not meant to lock people in or be overly difficult to achieve. It's really a normal process of using the protocol, but for the first time, it's really smart contract enforced. Okay, so I'm going to just go through some of the initial questions we have about the token sale and then go to the walkthrough. So the first question someone was asking is that if there's any sort of time phase or cap on purchasing, or is it first come, first serve? So as you may know, the registration for our sale has been open since July 16th. And so we require anyone who participates in the sale to go through this registration process. And so for the first 24 hours of the sale, anyone who has an approved registration will have a guaranteed allocation for that period. After that, as long as the sale lasts, which is up to August 10th, it'll be on a first come, first serve. But any new purchasers who come after the sale has started, if there's any allocations, they would still have to go through the same registration process. The next question is if there's any way to track the progress or results of the sale. There's going to be a few ways. We're going to have on the foam.space/token page a live counter. I think there will also be a live counter on the Token Foundry dashboard page. And then additionally, once you go through the contribution process, you'll be able to see the smart contract addresses and track them yourself on Etherscan if you wish. We intend to sell all 300 million tokens for sale, 30% of the supply. So any unsold tokens will then be rounded down and distributed to all the token purchasers after the sale. So tokens are initially distributed instantly. Right after you complete your purchase, the contract will distribute foam tokens on the mainnet of Ethereum. And after the sale, if there are any unsold tokens, they will also be distributed proportionally to all the purchasers. Someone asks about our intention for the sale. We intend to have, if we sell the maximum amount, to use this funds for the next few years to expand our team, as well as develop the protocol and really be able to focus independently on launching an open source protocol. We previously had a seed investment round last summer, and other than that, we only have this one public token sale. Someone asks if we will be able to test the token curated registry before launching to mainnet. The answer is yes and no. No in that we'll be launching straight to mainnet, the final application in its final tested form, but in the meantime you're able to test the spatial index beta that's currently on the Rinkeby test network. You can access it at beta.foam.space, and that really gives you a sense of what adding a point or contract is like. You can add points to the map using MetaMask or Uport, so that's a great way to get started. I'm just going to double back. I see Jeff in the comments asking again about to unpack the usage requirements. I just went over them, but I'll repeat again and say that there will be a detailed proof of use guide coming prior to you needing to prove use. But the percent metrics you can reach, sorry, I'm just reading some of the questions. The percent bases you can reach any way you'd like. So everyone has to add 10 points, and the percent basage can be achieved by either adding more stakes to those points, voting, or signaling. It's really up to you how you want to achieve that percent metric. And of course, once you do achieve it, you can also always withdraw and transfer your tokens to other wallets or use them in different ways. For the 10 initial proof of points of interest, if you add them in good faith, but voters decide they're not good, you do risk losing them. But if you are adding them in good faith and all the purchasers in the initial period are going through the same process and attesting to also be good faith token holders, we don't imagine that will be an issue to start. But definitely going to be something we can't fully control, so we'll have to see how all the token holders act, but we hope that everyone continues to act in good faith. And so, yeah, just wrapping up some of the existing questions, yeah, you are able to test of a basically beta version of the curated registry on the beta.foam.space, where you can add test points, and it'll be a similar user experience to the final TCR. There's also on our blog a user experience preview of the mainnet application called mainnet preview, so if someone can maybe post the link, or who's listening in our team, but yeah. And then the question about how much time to fill the requested allocation without a gas war. So as mentioned, if you are already registered and approved, the first 24 hours will be exclusively for those who have been approved, so you won't have to worry about a gas war at all. So those are all the existing questions we have around the token sale. There are some other general questions we'll get to after, but I'm going to pivot now to showing the user flow for how you actually make those purchases. Okay, whatever. So if you all can see the screen, essentially once the sale is live and you go to the Foam project page, there'll be a button that says purchase as opposed to register. There'll be a new button being added. And so here you'll be brought to this screen where you're able to review your purchase of what you've been approved for and basically begin the checkout process. So from here, if this looks correct, you're able to go to the next screen and review kind of all of that. And so we have accepted registrations in US dollars. And so at the time of your contribution, the platform is going to be calculating the number of Foam tokens that equals, as well as the actual Ether amount that you must send at that exact time. And so the platform is querying about the top 5 exchanges and coming up with this average. So that depending on when you contribute, your Ether amount may be fluctuated. So you're able to kind of review this as well as go to here, where you can basically then agree to the checkout process and also understand the process that if the token sale does not sell out, there may be additional tokens distributed. So here's really where then the optionality kind of comes in, where I see this is delayed.
Yeah, it's like 30 seconds.
I just see some lag in our video, apologies. The next screen that will come after that is that you're able to then select if you want to participate in MetaMask, Ledger, or an additional wallet. And I'm just going to pause for a second and allow our video lag to catch up to the next screen. So here you're able to select if you want to use, as I said, MetaMask, Ledger, or an additional wallet, for example, my Ether wallet. It's not supported now, but prior to the proof of use and mainnet launching, we're going to allow you to add an additional wallet. So that means if you wanted to purchase the majority of your tokens onto a Ledger or my Ether wallet cold storage, you'll be able to add an additional address later on. That will be your kind of hot wallet so that you're able to prove use by transferring some to MetaMask, keeping some in a Ledger, for example. But for now, you can pick the wallet you're most comfortable with storing your tokens in. And so for each of these options, there's a slightly different user flow, which I'll now go through. So for example, if we're going to start with the other option, which is basically equivalent to a My Ether wallet option. It's really delayed.
Yeah. The audio's up with us though.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Delayed? I see. So should I just keep going?
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. And so here you'll be able to first insert your wallet address that you've selected for this other option. And as it says here, after receiving your tokens, you'll be able to add one additional wallet later on before proving use. But the initial wallet that you do set cannot be changed. And definitely make sure that if you are going through this option, that it's not an exchange address or a Coinbase address, and it is an actual wallet you control the private key to. So as the next step, you're able to just add your wallet address, and once you go forward, you can continue the checkout process. And so here there's then this step-by-step aspect where you're going to get this data fields that you'll need to copy into your raw transaction field. So for example, you're going to put the Ether amount that is required. And as the next, you're going to have the sale address for the foam sale that you're going to need to copy and add to your transaction. And then every user will have a unique data payload generated for them. And this is essentially your unique whitelisting as an approved address. And so you'll need to include this data payload in your transaction for it to be approved by the sale contract. And so as the final step, or one of them, you'll then send that transaction from my Ether wallet, if that's what you're using, confirm that everything is correct, and then you can verify this transaction and track that on Etherscan, see that the tokens have actually been delivered to you, and then also track the rest of the sale on your Token Foundry account page. So I believe this is now a new flow for potentially MetaMask. So here, it's going to be the same process that we showed prior.
I just started it over.
It starts over. That's the same one. That's not the same. Can we go to the old one?
Yeah.
Sorry. I guess he only showed me the new one there.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay, sorry for the short delay. Now just going to show the MetaMask logout, and then the Ledger logout, and then we can return to everyone's questions. So here on MetaMask, if you're able to then select that option, it looks the same as the other checkout. Sorry for the fast screens, guys. So here, instead of copying, pasting your unique data payload to my Ether wallet. If you're using MetaMask, that data payload will automatically be generated for you and shown as a signed transaction you have to sign. And so the MetaMask is a little bit simpler. Once you just approve that, it'll be auto-filled for you, and you'll have to wait for that to go through. And you'll then be able to successfully purchase the token. So I can definitely say the MetaMask is the probably simplest option, but I would say the general sentiment in the Ethereum community is using my Ether wallet or Ledger is always the more secure option. So if you feel more secure with that, we will allow you to transfer some tokens to MetaMask after for the proof of use aspects. And so the final flow is on the Ledger checkout. So if you wanted to use a Ledger or a hard wallet, you would select the Ledger option. And here it's the same kind of checkout screen. And so first you're going to have to, as you know, if you've used a Ledger before, plug in your Ledger, put in the PIN code to unlock it, and then you're going to also need to enable browser support for your Ledger to be able to interact with the platform. So once all of those three things have been achieved, your Ledger will be connected to the platform. And then you'll be selecting which wallet you're planning to use that's associated with your Ledger. Continue to do that. And then you can sign directly from your Ledger. And then this transaction will go through. As a note, we are still trying to finalize with a Ledger that it's hard to read the data from it. So some people may be stuck on this screen, even though your transaction has actually gone through. So if you experience that, please check on Etherscan, and it may have gone through, even though it's stuck on the screen for the Ledger option. We're working on a fix for that hopefully will be live by tomorrow. But again, you then should hopefully be able to find the screen and have achieved your purchase. So that's really the three options for the walkthrough. We have the blog post, which also specifies that, and then please feel free to reach out to us during the process in Telegram or email. Our help email is info@foam.space. During the process, we'll be happy to help. So going to just return to some of the more general questions people had about foam for the rest of the cell. And just to the question of AC/DC in the community, we are currently at 100% of registrants, so during that period we're actually slightly oversubscribed. We don't expect every person to contribute, and up till now everyone who's registered has the first day to claim that allocation, and afterwards it'll be first comes, first serve.
All right, and the first kind of general question we have is your main philosophy and focus in proof of location, or rather actual global location positioning? So yeah, the primary focus of dynamic proof of location is being able to prove location, and that's critical for smart contracts to be able to execute on spatial parameters.
I'll also add, just to our philosophy, we're really focused on building a consensus-driven map. So how do we actually have this shared source of truth in a way that other contracts or systems could plug into? And really then having this verification aspect is really crucial to that. So definitely our philosophy is on the verification side, rather than a real-time positioning system for people, although that can come as an extension of the project. I'm just going to jump to a question that came in the chat about any plans on changing metadata fields over time. Someone saying they might be hard to nail the database structure on the first try. Would any changes affect challenging? So this is something we've definitely spent time thinking about. We're currently using IPFS for the metadata, and we have a post about that outlining the difficulties of storing data on-chain. And so at the moment, we don't allow edits of that metadata because it's stored as a hash on the chain. But definitely the application will continue to evolve, and that we understand just editing metadata or challenging metadata specifically is definitely desirable. So it's something that we will look to support, but at the moment it's reliant on an IPFS structure that is also then immutable. Someone else is asking in the chat if we have legal opinions. So you can look on our website, our partners. We work with Perkins Coie law firm, and we're also been part of this Brooklyn Project initiative, which is just a framework of how to launch a utility token, which provides no guarantees, but Foam is quite confident that we are following this framework in a way that we're quite confident with, and being the first on the Token Foundry platform to open the sale to US purchasers. We spent a lot of time over the last 8 months really working through that structure.
And some more previous questions. Do you have any cases where proof of location would solve or protect from being scammed by taxi drivers or other scenarios? So yeah, there was an actual instance, I believe in Laos, where Uber drivers were spoofing their locations to make the route look longer than it actually was and charging the customers more. And implementing proof of location would be able to help protect consumers from that. And other industries, there's smart cars can lie about the position to kind of cheat stoplights, and implementing proof of location would help prevent against that.
Yeah, so I actually was just speaking with someone from the operations team of Uber, and they were talking about when they launched in China, they actually had a bonus program. So for every hour you drove, you had an extra amount of bonus fees paid to you, and drivers then were arbitraging that by spoofing their GPS, so that instead of driving in a straight line, it looked like they were driving in an S-curve, and it actually cost Uber millions of dollars in false rewards they paid out. So we really see that as a tip of the iceberg, where location verification is actually quite a serious problem for many companies. And so definitely on a user level, when it's really at scale, it definitely can protect from a lot of scam or fraud scenarios.
And that was in Lagos, sorry.
Yeah, Brandon's example. So just then moving on to some questions about hardware. So as we've said all along, the time synchronization protocol is radio agnostic in that it can be run on different kinds of hardware over time. But we've chosen to start with the low power wide area network radios, and currently have been stress testing these LoRa radios to their absolute limits of like off the shelf hardware, and working on a custom firmware optimized for time synchronization. And so that developer board that we're using is based on an Arduino and costs around $45, and then is hooked to a Raspberry Pi device. So that's really like for initial testing what the kind of costs are going to be. And we're going to be looking into supporting initial hardware distributions for that testing, because we know that won't be a final cost. But you can then imagine that different zone anchors are going to range between very low cost of low hundreds of dollars to potentially very expensive ones that have advanced antenna equipment or atomic clocks. So really, we're going to be looking at things on a wide scale, but in terms of the initial zone anchors, and especially in the testing phase, the idea is to keep costs as low as possible. We don't have a particular maker of the hardware, in that there are many vendors or suppliers of the LoRa chip, but in that if we have a unique specification that we're going to recommend, we're going to then look into a specific manufacturer to make that easier for people. So there's just some questions in the live chat. So first question is, if their tokens are ERC20s, how do we ensure that people have actually fulfilled their staking requirements of proof of use? So it's a great question, and we'll specify this in detail when we launch the proof of use blog post, but we've been working on the proof of use smart contracts. And so there's a smart contract called the token controller. And so the token controller specifies what you're allowed to do with your tokens. So at the time of sale or purchase, you'll be receiving your tokens right away, but the token controller will be in place, so you won't be able to transfer them anywhere. And then when the foam mainnet launches at the end of August, you're only able to interact with those contracts. And once you fulfill your proof of use thresholds, the token controller is able to be aware of that and will allow you out of the system, essentially. So the token is a standard ERC20, but there's this additional token controller contract that plays a role in proof of use. So someone asks how they can help share locations of potholes, which is actually quite an interesting project. We know in the mapping community there's a lot of people trying to map unique things like potholes, construction sites, things like that. I would say as a start, you can add them as normal points of interest, but that really kind of speaks to the idea of how to build applications using foam. So we do have a developer portal, developer@foam.space, where anyone can use these same tools to build applications and even build on top of the token curator registry. So for example, an application that only tracked or mapped areas of like damaged public roads can be its own standalone application as well. So you could try to either build on top of that or start a community within the main TCR. And just to yep, the answer is yep. We will have an in-depth guide about proof of use with a video webinar, blog posts, and a full kind of fledged guide to make sure everyone's able to achieve proof of use. The best we can say right now is that you can look at the mainnet preview of the application as well as test the spatial index to get a sense of how it works. And otherwise, we will be providing those guides. Okay. Just moving on to some of the general questions people submitted during the registration for this call. Someone says they're wondering about location tracking aspects. Will there be any issues processing time as the project scales? And how do we address regulatory issues? So essentially the protocol is radio agnostic, as we said, and we're starting on this low power radio networks. And generally those are on unlicensed bands. In America, they're called ISM band, which means industry, science, and medicine. So you don't need any sort of particular license to run these radios. It's equivalent to Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. You don't need to ask permission. So these low power radios are permissionless, which is really exciting. That said, every country actually has their own kind of unique, or jurisdiction, their own unique laws around radio frequencies and how often you're allowed to use them and to what extent. So definitely the protocol will need to address that through those communities, and that's why we are radio agnostic. So there may be different countries that need to leverage other radios that are more sufficient for the regulation of the radio bands there. So it's definitely going to be a process of learning and pushing those limits. In terms of how do we actually scale, if anyone's not familiar, Foam has its own kind of scaling solution for the dynamic proof of location. Just our friends at Decent Fund just posted a great blog post about it. If we'll try to share the link here. But essentially, we rely on local zones of coverage. So they're each running this radio protocol locally. And then all these zones of zone anchors are sharing a state machine. And for that, we use Tendermint. And then we have this kind of child blockchain, parent blockchain logic, where the staking is occurring on Ethereum to get access to these local zones. And those local zones are themselves blockchains. And so Tendermint has an instant finality. And the radio protocol is also happening live, so that's how we'll handle those processing times, but it's an unknown of the latency of how long it will take for that to be checked for fraud and put back to the root chain. So definitely something we're going to be testing through the process. And the final question I see here is about what cities or institutions or industries are focusing on bootstrapping Foam. In the go-to market. So I'll say, as people may know, we're engaged in a lot of blockchain industry consortiums in mobility, supply chain, trusted IoT, and are going to be pursuing proofs of concepts in those domains. But definitely as a go-to market, we are launching this protocol with a set of dedicated stakeholders, and you can see through our community highlights as well as a heat map we've published of where people are interested in setting up points and zones, that there is like a global interest, and so the protocol then will develop based on where the stakeholders actually want points to be or where they want testing to be. But we will, of course, be a really active community member and also work on engaging OpenStreetMap users, cartographers from Foursquare and Google, and really onboarding more people to the application, as well as like having in the short term centralized incentives and rewards for people to participate, for us as one of the major community members to ensure that there's a bootstrapping aspect. I see a question saying rumors floating about a token being switched from a utility to a consumer. I'm not really sure what you're referring to in that they're essentially one and the same, but I would recommend you to look on the Token Foundry blog. I'll post the link now to the Token Foundry standards for consumer tokens. It's essentially a subset of a utility token, but the idea is that they're really meant for open to anyone, like our cell is, and meant to actually be consumed or used on the launch. So they're doesn't allow me to post web addresses.
Send it to Arthur. Then you can.
The token will have a dynamic price based on how the sale goes, but after the time of sale, the price will be what it is sold for, and there's an initial use period, as we described, where there is no trading allowed. And to your question, Jeff, about how to stop GPS spoofing, I mean, that's essentially the point of dynamic proof of location, in that it's completely independent of GPS and is interactive and allows proofs to be generated. So that's how we try to mitigate any GPS spoofing, is really the ethos of the project and why we're launching it. After the initial use period, there are ERC20 tokens that you have purchased and are your property. We hope you continue to use them to support the protocol.
If there's any other questions, we can wrap up otherwise.
Arthur, can you put the heat map of the potential zone anchors? Yeah, 1 second.
But thank you, everyone, for your questions. If you have any issues with the purchasing process, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll get everything sorted out for you.
Yeah.
Are you posting the link? We'll post the heat map link in the Telegram right now, Gibran, in the main channel. But thanks everyone for joining. We'll continue to answer your questions in the chat, and have a great day, and hope to see you all tomorrow during the token sale launch.
Yep, bye all.